Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is the second video of this playlist about macroeconomics. So in the first video we gave a definition to what macroeconomics is and how it works, connecting individuals, corporations, government, labor force market, and financial markets. Today, from this video on, we will talk about different components of the economy, specifically what macroeconomics is looking at. But before doing that, you hear the tune. This is offered by Circo Loco Ibiza. I hope you enjoy the little tune in the background. Also, sorry, I'm a little sweaty. Here there are 30 degrees right now, so I have to keep a t-shirt on to be somewhat professional, but we are proud of our origins. So let's go. So these are the components of macroeconomics we'll care about from this video on. Economic growth, employment and unemployment, inflation and price stability, government policies, fiscal and monetary, and international trades and exchange. There's a lot of content to cover here, so for this video we will start with the first one, economic growth, and then in the following videos we will talk about employment, then another video for price stability and inflation, another video for fiscal and monetary policy, and finally international trades and exchange. Okay, so let's focus on economic growth for the purpose of this video. So the first question we need to ask is, what is economic growth? Economic growth, in simple terms, means producing more goods and services within a location over a period of time. So to give you a simple example, we can think of a small town that over time more businesses get open there, more people are moving there, more streets are built, better infrastructures, better public transportation. So all of this will contribute to the economic growth of that town. Okay, so now that we know what economic growth is, the next question is, what drives economic growth? So the main things that drive economic growth are investments and capital spending, labor force growth, technological advancements, and government policies. Okay? So these are the main drivers of economic growth. Now that we know what economic growth is and what drives economic growth, the next question is, how can we measure economic growth? The most common way to measure economic growth is through the GDP. Okay? So GDP is gross domestic product, and inside here we have all the goods and services produced by a country and within the country for a specific period of time. Then you can hear the words nominal and real GDP. Basically, what we like more is the real GDP because it's adjusted for inflation. So we will not care too much about nominal GDP because it's not a real measure and correct measure of the economic growth if we don't adjust for inflation you know. It might be a higher GDP, but if the inflation moved faster than the GDP, it means that the real GDP is actually negative. So what we'll focus on is real GDP. How do we calculate GDP? GDP has different ways to be calculated, but there's one way which is called like the expenditure way to calculate GDP, which is the most common and the most used. And you have this formula. And now, sorry. So you have this formula to calculate your GDP. What are these letters? You should ask yourself. So the C stands for consumption. The E stands for investments. The G stands for government spending. And X and M, let me move this. X and M are exports and imports. So the X is the export, the M is the imports. Therefore, the difference between them, we can call it net export. Okay. So these are the main categories that GDP takes into consideration. Then if you want, we can go deeper and I can talk about what's included in each category, and we can do that for sure. But since the GDP is already calculated for us, we don't actually need to know exactly what goes into each category. Instead, it's important to have an understanding of what we are measuring. Okay, so now for each category, let's see what we include in it. So for consumption, we include new goods and services. We don't include used goods, household production, illegal activities. Okay, so what do I mean by new goods and services and no to used goods? So for instance, if I am purchasing a used car from another person, that spending is not gonna get included into the current GDP. Why? Because that car is already included in a previous GDP when the previous car owner bought the car. Otherwise, we would double count if we also include used goods. And we don't want to do that to calculate the GDP precisely. Then household production, what do I mean by that? When you cook, when you clean, when you cut your grass, you are actually working, you're producing something, but the something is not paid for because you're cooking for yourself, you're cooking for your friends, you're cooking for your family. So that is not gonna be part of our GDP. And illegal activities, because simply because there's no way to keep track of everything going on in the black market. So for inventory, what do we include? We include business capital expenditures, constructions, for instance, residential constructions, new houses, and inventories. So the inventories of companies that are produced but not sold in the year, they are still included in the investment section of the GDP. What is not included here is if you buy an existing home. For the same exact reason, we don't include used goods in consumption. otherwise we would double count. And also not included in buying financial assets. Why would you like, you could say, well, if I'm buying a stock, it's an investment, no? Yes, it's an investment, but you're not producing, there's no production, it's a transfer. It's a transfer of an asset, it's not a production of an asset, basically. Then for government spending, here we include salaries of public workers, so like police, teachers, government workers. We include the spending for infrastructures, like building new roads, improving public transportation, etc. And then just public services and programs that the city might have, or the state might have, or the province might have, and so on. What we do not include here, transfer payments, which are like pensions, unemployment benefits, social security. It's not an actual production of something, it's just money transfer. So we don't want to include that. And also we don't include interest payment on government debts. Okay, and then the last thing, X minus M, so exports minus imports. So why we add the exports and subtract the imports? Well, because the exports are goods and services produced domestically and sold abroad. So we add that. And then we subtract imports because these are goods and services that enter the country, but they're not produced within the country. So we have to subtract those goods and services in order to see the real GDP for that specific country. Okay, perfect. So now that we have a little understanding of what is economic growth, what drives economic growth, how we can measure economic growth, the next thing we can look at is economic growth always good? Well, economic growth in broad terms is great because it leads to more jobs, higher income, more tax revenues for the government, and so the government can spend more money on improving the country or the city with more infrastructures, better roads, better services, etc. But there's also a risk because a too fast economic growth can lead to inflation. This is why the central banks and the Federal Reserve have a very important role in the economy, because they have to manage all these situations. And the economic growth we are talking about today is just one component of the economy, okay? One little thing. As we have seen here, we'll talk about like many other things in the next videos. So this is a risk for a country that is expanding too fast. they are exposing themselves to higher inflation, which in the end can lead to eventually recession or a crisis, etc., etc. So one last thing I want to mention in this video about economic growth is what type of news and economic data we can look at. There are multiple. The one that we just talked about for a good part is the GDP, and is released quarterly and annually. Then you have retail sales news, which basically the higher the data, the higher and stronger the consumption is by retails. Then we have data about industrial production to see how corporations are doing, how jobs are, and all of these news are different metrics, but they are also all part of the same bigger topic. You know, everything is connected. Like all the things we're gonna talk about in the next video, they are all connected together. Then we look at central banks statements, or like Federal Reserve speaking, doing reports. And finally we look at the PMI, which is Purchase Managers Index, maybe Purchasing Managers Index. And also this gives a good indication of how managers are managing their firms, and so this is why it's also an important economic data we will look at. Okay, so to sum up this video, at the beginning I divided this macroeconomics playlist into 5 different topics, and today we went through the first one, economic growth. We have understood together what is economic growth, what drives economic growth, how can we measure economic growth, the calculation to calculate GDP, what is included in the GDP and what is not, if economic growth is always good. Most of the times, yes, if it's under control, but if it grows too fast, there's a risk for higher inflation. And then what type of news and economic data are getting released monthly, quarterly, yearly, to keep track of the economic cycle. I hope you enjoyed this video, you enjoyed the tune, and I'll see you in the next video of this macroeconomics playlist. Give a like and have a great day.